Could being nice affect your church revitalization in a negative way? Let's talk about it on the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malphurs Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and A.J. Mathieu.
Welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Scott Ball. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, A.J. Mathieu.
All right.
Little behind the scenes here. We do these in spurts, recordings. We do several, and then you're gone. You're not in this country.
Gallivanting around planet Earth.
Around the globe. Yeah. So it feels, for you, listener, it feels like no time passed. But for us, it's been a little bit. So it's nice to be back on the recording train, as it were.
Yep. Several of these to do here in the next few days. So.
Yes, that is true. We'll get lots of practice here over the next few days. So today we're talking about how being nice can actually be really detrimental to your church revitalization, and it's true. And we're going to hone in on three specific ways that you might feel like, man, I'm just trying to do the right thing by people. I'm trying to be nice. And it may actually be counterproductive. It may be working against you as you're wanting to help your church not just grow, but ultimately, again, it's about discipleship. It's about reaching people with the good news. And so if sometimes what might seem like the right thing in the short term might actually be hurting the spiritual impact that your church could be making in your community. So before we dive into that today, we'd love to just remind you to go to healthychurchestoolkit.com, sign up free for 7 days, and access some tools that will definitely not hurt your church revitalization. They will help your church revitalization. Getting rave reviews over there on the Healthy Churches Toolkit, people saying, man, this is really helpful stuff. I didn't know it did this. There are so many features packed in, we can't even talk about them all. So go to healthychurchestoolkit.com, sign up free for 7 days, and try it out for yourself.
That's the only way to really get to really see the value of the toolkit. And yeah you're right. I mean, the more people that are in it that I talk to, they're like, I can't believe this is nice. This is really good.
So, well, yeah, they even get in it and they go, oh, they've been using it for a specific thing or two for a while. And then they go, man, it would be nice if something did X, Y, Z. And then I'm like, yeah, the toolkit does that. And then they're like, what? I didn't even know that I could do that. And then they found another feature. So, there's it's like lots of buried treasure in there.
There you go. Okay, talking about being nice. Now, there's nothing wrong with being nice, but sometimes the pursuit of nice comes in conflict with good leadership decisions. That's the crux of what we're talking about today. So, even then, there's a way to lead in which you are a kind person and a gentle person.
Yes,
but you still make good decisions. It doesn't mean that you are a harsh individual. That is not what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think actually, you may not know this because I worked on this outline before you saw it. But in the first draft of the article outline for this episode, I was thinking through this contrast between nice and kind, and how they're not exactly the same thing. So sometimes we can be nice, but it's not actually kind, and because the truth is kind. But the truth is not always nice.
Yeah.
And so I kind of got off of that just because I thought it was maybe a distraction from sort of like these ways that we are nice, and kind of whittled it down. But just as a side note, since you brought it up, there's this difference between being nice and being kind. And we want to kind of strip away that a little bit and focus on ways that we can be nice that are actually maybe unkind.
Yeah, I think a lot of the three things we're going to talk about, I think what is really being said here in being nice is really avoiding difficult leadership decisions, trying to keep the peace just for the sake of keeping the peace, a lack of confrontation. These are all things that good leaders don't necessarily want to avoid. They want to make good decisions and they want to see the organization, in this case, the church, succeed in the mission that Christ has given us. So, yeah, let's jump in. The first thing that we need to be wary of is tolerating the wrong people in the wrong roles.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what nice might look like here is that somebody has been doing something for a while and we don't want to upset them. And so we just allow that to keep going, even though they might be underperforming, or even maybe their role is not even one that's necessary or is helpful going forward, depending on changes that we're going to pursue during or after strategic envisioning process, to be realigning the church with its mission, vision. So, this plays out even in like our strategic envisioning process, Scott. We get these questions about when people are building their team. Well, should I, what type of people should I have on it? Should I invite this person or that person? And we always say, do not invite onto your team somebody that has been maybe a harsh critic or has just really been a problem. Because and the reason pastor would want to do that is like an olive branch, or to welcome them in, like, hey, I know we've maybe not seen eye to eye, but I'd like to bring you in so we can get your point of view and you can really feel a part of things. And we just learned from experience that those types of people just bring their negativity in and they just push back against all of the decisions that the team makes. And so now we say, don't do that. Don't try to be nice and invite people in that will not be helpful to the team. And that is always, I think, the right decision.
Yeah. Another context where I see this a lot is I'll work with a lot of churches, and I've got several in mind. So this is a common thing that comes up where I'll work with a church that has some sort of some sort of a board or a council or a consistory or something like that, where the people who are put into that team are put there because they're sort of an elder statesman kind of person in the church. They've been there a long time, a patriarch type individual, and there's nothing wrong with them. They're a good guy, good heart, good intention, all of that is fine, but they're not really a leader, and they're not really functioning in the way that you really like an executive board or a senior leadership board to function. And then often they're just too big. Like the team is too large. When you've got 15 people, on a church board, they function more like a deliberative body rather than like a team of spiritual leaders, which is what you really want at the top. So you, sometimes when we're like, well, you know what? Like, tolerating the wrong people in the wrong roles may not even be a reflection of this person being a bad person. It just might be, we need to reorient this team so that it functions more like we need it to, for us to be a healthy church and for us to grow the way that we want to. And so we're going to have to move people out of certain positions or alter the way that the team is constructed so that they are elevated based on their competence and their ability to lead in this particular way. But we don't want to hurt people's feelings, and so we kind of keep people on these teams longer than we should, or we don't reorient the way that team works because we don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. And that can be a detriment to the church. And if any particular church is listening to right now, I just want to say I'm not talking about you, because I see this so often. It's not like a singular church. It's almost every time I work with the church. They just don't have that senior board optimized the right way, and there's just a lot of fear about reorienting the way that is structured, because they don't want to hurt someone's feelings.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is tough whenever the pastor might be one of those people too that isn't necessarily a strong leader.
Oh, that could be the case.
Yeah.
So listen, again, I know I'm going through some of this with a few churches right now, and I think they might be going, if they're listening, going, oh, he's talking about us. I'm like, I promise I'm not. Like, I don't have anything specific in mind. This is a very common problem, and it's a very hard one to get past, just because there are good people who might be on those boards. They're genuinely good people, and you're like,
right,
I don't want to make this change and make them think that they're that they're a toxic person or they're
Mhm.
whatever. And when that's just not the case, and you're like, I just need to change the way that this board works. So I need to make some changes here, but it's not a reflection on you individually as not a good person or not a good leader or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That can be tough, but
Yeah.
okay. All right. The second one in which being nice, could affect negatively your revitalization work is in softening or delaying your vision. And and again, it's this like peacekeeping thing. Don't hurt feelings. In which in our process, we've gathered a strategic leadership team together. Like lay leaders or staff people,
Yeah.
elders in the church that have gone through hours and hours and hours of discussion, deliberation, and planning, and then we're like, okay, let's do something, and
Yeah.
and then we start to fall back because like, oh boy, it seemed good when we were talking about it, but now that I have to talk to this person about we're going to be discontinuing this ministry or we're going to need to realign them somewhere else. I don't really want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Or you get even a few months down the road and people start pushing back against this vision that is being talked about now.
Yeah.
And you want to like, oh, well, maybe we
Maybe you
won't do it
have
that
to.
way.
Yeah.
Maybe in a
Mm-hmm.
few years we'll do it. And that just has negative consequences to it. You really have got to stand firm. Once you and the team have said, all right, this is where we're going, and we really believe God's calling us this direction,
Yeah.
we've got to keep moving with that because you're going to lose credibility to try to restart later. And you're just not really going to gain anything
Mm-hmm.
from it other than staying where you are, which isn't good. If you wanted to break out of where you are, staying here is not a good option. We need to
Yeah.
figure out, where are we going to go?
Totally. I mean, I think that you gave some good caveats there too, which are, you know, when we are in an initial planning phase, I tell every church I work with, look, if the plan is executed the exact same way that we put it together on paper in our plan session, you'll be the first church. We expect that no plan survives first contact with reality. That's not an original quote. I can't remember who said that originally, but it's very true. You're gonna make plans. They're going to shift. So what we're not saying is the plans that you make in your planning session can never change. Otherwise, that, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about making a plan, working that plan, starting to get to the point where you're really at the implementation threshold where you go, we're making this thing happen. And then you start to get pushback from, admittedly, it's going to be a minority of people. They might be a really vocal minority,
Yeah.
but it's going to be a minority. And then going, maybe we don't. I worked with this church in the last year or so that I've got just so much sympathy for. They kind of encountered this, except it was a very vocal minority who took a pretty significant chunk of people with them. Then they decided to just leave the church because they didn't like. They weren't even protesting a particular change. They were just kind of protesting the fact that there was even a discussion about change, which is the lamest kind of protest in my personal opinion. And so I had this fear, as a guide. I was like, man, I bet what I hope that they don't do is just bail on the process altogether, because some people got frustrated and left. And so the worst thing to do is to then go, oh man, they're not coming back. Okay. Those folks so the challenges that you saw or the things that you thought, man, this needs changing. That didn't change just because some people left. All of the upside is on the other side of executing the change. When those people left the church, sadly and frustratingly, it's not as if all of the problems that predated that situation magically went away. Those challenges are still there. And so, I don't know. I guess my point is, there's a very real feeling and even a very real risk that some people in your church might get frustrated enough to even leave. And that fear becomes so loud and so aggressive that a church would just bail on the process altogether and go, we shouldn't do anything. And as if that would fix the problems with the people, which it won't. and as if that would magically make go away all of the things, all of the reasons why you went through the revitalization process to begin with, which it doesn't.
Yeah.
And so I'm extremely proud of this church, by the way. They have not let it deter them. They had a season kind of to try to mourn this challenge, but they're moving forward, and I'm extremely proud of them. I've got a lot of hope. And in fact, I heard a report recently that they just baptized several people just a couple weeks ago. So I mean, the Lord is working through it, and it's a good validation that they're that the work they're doing is important. So I don't know. I just want to say, I don't even want to invalidate the fear that, hey, if you implement change, some people might leave. They might, but what's the alternative? The alternative is to get stuck in the past and not make an impact.
Yeah. Softening your fear to maintain comfort is only going to make it harder to lead later.
That's right.
Yep. All right. Our next point here, Scott, letting culture drift is another way that being nice will affect negatively your revitalization efforts. And so, maybe this is similar to the previous point. Not letting things go unaddressed. This creep that can happen. Culture has to be maintained. I mean, it forms relatively naturally on its own. Culture forms naturally, unless you're hyper intentional about developing it. And so it can also drift naturally unless you're hyper intentional about maintaining it. Yeah. And so, I think this is, I don't know if you would call this other side of the coin from the previous point, but definitely adjacent to it, that if we're not staying focused on the culture that we want to maintain, then for the sake of being nice and letting people get away with things or push, a certain direction that they would like to see the church move in, then that's just going to cause you problems. So a healthy leader, a strong leader needs to be aware of these things and keep an eye on that and make sure that we're driving in the right direction in as much of a unified manner as we can to maintain unity and to achieve the goals together that God's called us to.
Yeah. The culture of a church is something that it is dynamic and it does shift over time. And it's one of those things that I think it can shift in a negative direction, especially if it goes unattended, like you're saying. I think drift is the right word. I mean, just imagine kind of sitting on a raft or something out in a lake or out in the ocean. You're not even paddling, but you're not going to stay static. You're not going to stay in the same spot over a period of time. It's going to move. And I think it's incumbent on leaders, like you're saying, to take charge of the oar and go, I want the culture of this church to go where God wants it to be. I don't want to just be subject to be, as this is what Scripture would say, to be tossed to and fro by every wave of human doctrine, right?
Yeah.
And that can very much happen, whether that's, unhealthy teaching from our culture or just unhealthy habits from people who would rather be complacent and apathetic and comfortable rather than on mission and focusing on reaching the next person with the good news about Jesus. And so, as leaders, you own the oar for the where we're going with the culture. And it's not nice. It may be nice, but it's not kind to your church to allow the culture of the church to just be moved by people who may be well-intentioned, but certainly not be intentional about where the church is going.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking the exact same scripture. You were referring to Ephesians 4 and, backing up from that. I mean, those who would be tossed by the waves and the wind, are those lacking maturity. And we battle against that by, that whole section starts off on, that Christ gave the apostles, the teachers and whatnot to, equip the saints for the works of the ministry, for unity in the church and for maturity, attaining the full measure of Christ. And so, focusing focusing on maturity, building up disciples, and maintaining unity is our fight against that. Because it is those who remain infants that will be tossed. Sometimes, you know what infants do, Scott? They cry. They cry and they scream.
They're loud.
And they're loud.
Yeah, they're very loud.
And even the oldest saints sometimes can appear sometimes as infants in the church.
Yeah, I mean, like we fly a lot, and like, I don't know. I'm trying to like form this analogy in my mind, but when there's a baby crying on an airplane, everyone's thinking someone's got to do something about that baby. No, I don't get mad about it. Some people get angry about babies on airplanes, and I don't get mad about it. Like, babies being a baby,
That's why God invented noise-canceling headphones.
That's right. Yeah. But everybody's thinking, like, gosh, someone's got to do something about that baby. But we recognize it's just one baby, right? The difference is, like, in church culture, there could be one or two spiritual babies who are making a lot of noise, but what we do in our minds is we go, everyone thinks this, and we're like, no, not everyone thinks this. You got a couple of loud spiritual babies, and put on the noise canceling headphones, and we're not changing the way that the whole plane is flying, because we got a couple of loud babies on the plane.
Yeah, there we go. So I guess in the end, what we're saying is be strong as a leader. Yep. Leaders lead, and that's the position that God has called you to in your church.
Be kind. I mean, I want to say be kind. Don't be a jerk.
Don't be mean.
But tolerating negative stuff, it might seem nice, but it isn't truly kind, actually.
Yeah, it's not going to be helpful in the long run. Yeah, no. It might help you avoid a difficult conversation in the near term, but it will not help you in the long term to lead well and lead your church towards what God is calling you to, which is the most important task. So.
Yep. Amen.
All right. Well, then, there you go. A relatively quick episode of the Church Revitalization podcast. So we are glad that you were with us for this important topic. We'll be back with you again next week. We hope to see you then.